Oh, this is a disaster, guys. I hit live on this show as my mic was falling over. This is
Nice work,
welcome.
Patrick.
Well, at the end of 96 hours of extra live streaming that's been happening on Giant Bomb, I decided that we needed one more stunt. If you want to raise money, for Patrick's microphone to get screwed back onto his desk. That's not a great reason. That's not a particularly compelling reason to try and save some sick kids. But hey, you shouldn't need a reason to do that. I'm gonna Alex introduce our guest while I try and attach this mic back to my desk.
Oh, Patrick. Ladies and gentlemen, we are once again joined by, I'm just going to go ahead and say my favorite guest that we have back time and time again. Cara Ellison, how are you doing?
Hello, I am currently in Tokyo on my journey slash adventure slash weird gonzo thing. And I am now in the house of Jane Adelstein, who wrote Tokyo Vice, who's a very important journalist and friend to the Yakuza-ish.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So, this is where I'm broadcasting from, because he has very good internet, you see, so.
And it is exceptionally late over there, as I'm to understand. You've been staying up waiting for us to do this show.
Yes, it is currently 2:06 a.m. And I plan on afterwards. I plan on drinking some wine and then going to bed.
That sounds like a fantastic plan. It's good to know that it is at least the AM somewhere for one of the people on Bombin the AM this week. So thank you again for joining us.
No problems.
Okay, well I fixed my mic, so everything's fine. Everything's cool. I'm sure it'll fall over again, but it's temporarily reattached to my desk. But so. Carrie, you were asking, like, what the hell? Why are we making you wait so much longer than originally we had planned to do this show? But the last 96 hours has been part of Giant Bomb's now annual tradition. The community has been doing it for longer than we have as a staff, but the community and the staff have joined together in the last 2 years to do this Extra Life charity streaming. It's something that goes on for longer than just the last couple of days, but there's sort of a concentrated effort in the last couple of days to have people stream for 24 hours to raise money for local hospitals for sick children. And so we had 96 almost consecutive hours happening the past couple of days. Myself and Dave Lang and a bunch of folks from Iron Galaxy started it out on Thursday. For the first 24 hours, we switched over to Jason and company in San Francisco. I believe Samantha Coleman joined them out there along with some other guests. Then Saturday, Brad Shoemaker did his own 24 hours by himself in his apartment. And then Alexis and Drew did the final 24 hours that just wrapped up about half an hour ago, in which they played through a bunch of Halo games and did a bunch of other stuff. But at the end of it, I will pull up, and people can still donate, so it goes through the end of the year. But we had an ambitious community, and that involves ourselves and the community that was doing streams. There was an ambitious goal to raise $175,000, and we smashed that. We have raised $188,000. The staff almost reached their own individual goal of $100,000. We're within spitting distance of that, and probably can hit it by the end of the year. But yeah, nearly $200,000 raised in the last 96 hours, that's pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah,
That's incredible. Like, well done. I mean, in Japan here, there's a phrase for what I want to say, which is "otsukare-sama deshita," which means I guess sort of like thank you for your hard work, but it's like an all-purpose phrase. But yeah, thank you. That's like pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I also realized after having participated in the first stretch of that, staying up for 24 hours does weird things to your body.
It really does. It makes everything look strange and weird. Like, you know when you're a little bit wired from caffeine? It's kind of like that, but it's just like everything, you feel like your head is like floating above your body almost.
It's odd. So during the actual 24 hours, I didn't have too much trouble, when we were trying to, gin up, excuses and dumb stunts to do to get people to donate more money. Like, I was getting energized, so staying up was not the problem. It was, I went home, slept for about 3 hours because it was the middle of the day, so it was like a long nap, and then it's just the march to the evening to try and get to a proper sleep schedule again, and I was just incredibly on edge the entire time. Like, I wasn't drinking any coffee, I didn't need caffeine, I was just kind of getting through the day, but Like I tried to play like 20 minutes of The Evil Within, even after doing 24 hours of playing video games.
That's a bad idea. That was a bad pick.
Yeah, that's a bad decision.
I couldn't do it. It was weirding me out. And then I tried to finish a documentary I was watching about the Amityville Horror, and that was making me feel really strange too. Like I don't get scared particularly easy, but like 24 hours later, no mental capacity to process things. Like, for whatever reason, describing it as on edge or like having a little too much caffeine was absolutely right. I felt off in a way that I have not felt in a long, long time.
But it's that edginess without the sort of hyperactive brain activity. Like it's like your body is kind of shaky and you kind of like have this sort of extrasensory almost awareness of everything going on, but all your reaction times are slowed down to a significant degree, and you feel like you're walking through sludge while incredibly nervous.
Yeah. I mean, I did like a 24-hour gaming thing once, like a marathon for the Sick Kids Hospital in Edinburgh once, and that was really hard because what I did was, like, in order to get more money, to prize more money out of everyone, I said, why don't you sponsor me for like an hour slot to play a video game of your choice, right? And then I set up a webcam and everything, like, and then a stream of my games. And everyone sponsored me to play a different game. And like the worst one by far was my little brother, who sponsored me for like at 2 a.m., which was like well into the stream, to play Amnesia: A Dark Descent.
Oh god. Oh no.
I was like, that little shit. Like, I started playing like five minutes into this game, jumped myself in a cupboard and refused to come out. No, not actually literally, but in the game, just refused to come out of this cupboard. I was like in there with like this broom, and and I just started to go crazy, and then like my insanity meter was like going way down, and it basically just refused to come out. And then eventually I had to, because it was like basically 50 minutes were left of me supposed to be playing this game. So yeah, oh man, it was the worst. It was the absolute worst. So yeah, never. The moral of the story is never let your brother sponsor you to do anything. I think is
That's fair. That's fair. We during our stream, the camera we had hooked up to show everyone on the couch and everything started going on the fritz, and so we had to drop the actual camera that was shooting us and just switch over to audio and the gameplay of the games we were playing. And Dave Lang, owner of Iron Galaxy, he's I wouldn't call him elderly, but he's an older man. And as someone that is 29 and was complaining about how I felt staying up for 24 hours, I cannot imagine what that is like, 10 years past. I imagine it just gets more difficult as we go on. And he has several kids, and he was finishing this stream and then had to go and be a part of, I think, his daughter's 11th birthday. So like he had to roll right from 24 hours of games into an all-day celebration for his daughter. So he actually left and got like a couple hours of sleep, and I held down the fort, which just was reasonable. I was like, hey, you have to basically do another 18 hours of birthday parties. You go and take a shift underneath your desk. But so he came back out pretending he was going to try and keep going, and just straight up falls asleep on the couch. And we had hit a moment about 3/4 through where, it's kind of like a Kickstarter thing. Like the donations had kind of slowed down. We had kind of slowed down. We were so close to the end, but not close enough to be energized by being at the end. And I came up with this idea that if people started donating certain amounts of money, I would perform various stunts in order to wake him up. Because he was sleeping on the couch next to me, and eventually raised like something like $400 for various reasons that I got to woke him up. We didn't have it on camera, but I said I'll Vine it. I'll prove that I'm waking him up, and you will get your money by me putting out that Vine. So if you look on my Twitter account from a couple days ago, you can find that Vine. But I woke him up for charity. He was not particularly happy about it, but then I told him we raised a couple $100, and he's okay with it.
Dave Lang with sleep is already enough of a wild card. I cannot imagine putting Dave Lang, like sleep-deprived Dave Lang, in a room full of preteens. That just sounds like the worst idea imaginable. That sounds like kids are going to get tossed.
But
Yeah.
I also think like his experience of this party must have been really funny because he's like so sleep deprived. Like he probably just was wandering around going, "This is worse than Amnesia: The Dark Descent," you know.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. Um, so it was an interesting experience. I had a ton of fun doing it. I now have enough distance from it to go, oh, that'll be fun next year. But also, I'm so glad that it's next year and not anytime soon. It was fun to do, but I will happily wait another 365 days to stay up that long again. But Kara, what are you doing in Japan? I know you're bouncing around. Is this all part of your embedded project?
It is. I'm actually I'm writing this month at least about a developer who I think is probably going to change stuff a little bit for independent developers in Japan because he is making his own game for iOS, which is called Downwell, which hasn't been written about very much, but it's basically it's a game that's kind of like Spelunky, but for iOS. And it's like incredible. It's basically about a little dude who goes down a well, so it's like kind of vertical instead of horizontal like Spelunky. So it's like kind of vertical only game. And you go, it's about a dude who goes down a well with guns for shoes. Yes.
Okay, I'm in.
Yeah, I'm into it. And so like it's essentially this like little Spelunky game, but for mobile phones, or for iOS and I think Android. I'm not sure, but anyway, he's doing that, and I feel like not that many Japanese independent game developers, because there's like a big doujin scene here, but it's not entirely the same as like what we would think of as indie development, I guess, in the West. And so I think if he's successful, I think what's going to happen is there's going to be like like more Japanese developers are going to start making indie games specifically, which is really exciting, you know, because like there's so much talent over here, and all of it's in the studio system, really. So now, like this year at TGS, for example, there was actually Sony sponsored a floor for independent developers, and so there were like a lot of developers on the main floor that were indie developers for the first time at TGS, and it's a big deal because like this is the year, you know, for indie developers in Japan. And you know, like Bit Summit has become like a huge deal, and that's made people in Japan much more aware of like independent development here. And so it's really exciting. It's a super exciting time because I feel like all that talent is going to be like used to take risks and make more games, and they're going to come across and they're going to be put on Steam, I think, and it's just really exciting to think about. Like I'm so excited to see like what the homegrown talent sort of does here, you know?
Yeah, it definitely seems like you have, you know, Koji Igarashi, you have KJ Inafune, you have like really well-known big game developers that have worked in the studio system for ages because that's just the culture in Japan. The culture is that you work at the company that you work at and you basically work there forever. That's kind of the culture in Japan, and it's taken a long time to change that, and it's still changing. But you know, you have folks that have made classic video games that have the clout to leave and either do a Kickstarter or find alternate funding, and now it's just a matter of can they make games successful enough to prove that gamble is worth it for, you know, folks that maybe don't have as much notoriety or don't have as much you know, sort of classic games behind them. You know, they have to create this culture, and hopefully games like Mighty Number 9 and whatever Igarashi is working on will sort of spur other people to go, you know what, I don't have to do it the way it's always been done. There are alternate paths in Japan.
That's it, and like it's really interesting. I mean, like Ojiro-san, who's like the guy I'm writing about, like if he's successful, you know, if he's like one unknown guy, and like if he's successful in like sort of making enough money to fund his next game, like maybe more developers will also like gain unknown developers in Japan will gain the confidence to do it, because right now in Japan there's like a huge indie scene, like because I went to Tokyo Indies and there's a Kyoto Indies meetup as well, and but that scene is mainly run by foreigners, you know, it's mainly run by Americans who are Canadians, or you know, like there's a guy called Sagar who runs the Kyoto Indies, and then I think Tokyo Indies is run by I can't remember his name, but he's like a guy from Boston, and so like they basically started like these communities, and obviously they're welcoming to all sorts of people from everywhere. But right now, what's happening is like people, Japanese developers are kind of shy about their abilities, and they'll I think they're definitely going to gain more confidence like the more people are successful at doing this sort of thing. And because they like people like the big studio guys like Keiji Inafune, it's kind of like they can do it, and that's well and good, but it's like it needs to be a grassroots movement. It needs to come from people who just have cool ideas and are good designers, and they just want to have a crack at it, like they just want to try to make something. And like that's where like because like Keiji Inafune for a really long time he's been really critical of the Japanese development scene. Like he's always talking about how everything is just sequels on the TGS floor. And he's always said like he just wants more ideas, like more stuff, more new designers to come forth. And it's so exciting because I feel like right now is like the time. It's like right now is the time where we're going to start seeing this stuff from Japan. So I'm so excited about it, like really. So yeah, I wrote 2 things for The Guardian on like the independent development scene and like how things are like coming along here. And yeah, I feel like it's definitely really exciting. Like I'm super excited about it.
It seems like part of the problem has to be that in America and Europe and in other places where independent development has flourished and folks have found that you don't have to be in these AAA or studio systems in order to make the game that you want to make or even to participate in game development culture, has been that a lot of that's happened on the PC. It's happened in platforms that aren't necessarily the predominant preferred platform in Japan, right? Like Japan is a very handheld and mobile focused country, which obviously we've seen a lot of independent development on iOS and Android, but it seems like maybe that is part of it, in which you can very easily make games on the PC, but that's not where people are necessarily playing the games.
That's true, and like yeah, like that's definitely like one of the things that Ojiro-san was saying to me is like there's not like that PC culture, and Steam is like being a huge like influence on the West for such a long time. Like, and the reason why Ojiro I think has got kind of like the momentum for this is because he lived in New Zealand for 5 years and was exposed to this kind of PC gamer sort of culture where Steam ruled the roost, and like he played like quite a lot of Western games as well, like when he was living in New Zealand, and that was just to keep up with his friends at school basically. So he was immersed in this culture like by accident, I guess, and then he moved back to Japan with his parents and like he's at university now. He's studying opera singing, which is kind of unusual. So he's basically an opera singer who's making a video game, which is kind of amazing. And then I asked him, like, oh, hey, Ojiro, when did you start making video games? And he was like, oh, in March. And I was like, you made like a fucking Spelunky clone in Game Maker, and like it's there, it's almost finished. And you're like, Jesus Christ, like this guy, like he's incredible. So yeah, like it was amazing to me. But yeah, like that's where all of the impetus came from, is because he was exposed to all this like PC gaming stuff. He's like, oh well, I could just download this free thing and then start making a video game in Game Maker.
Oh, he makes it sound so easy. You just make a video game. That's just what you do, right? You just make a video game.
Yeah, I was like, why are you, because I'm writing about him, right, for the Embed With project, right? And I was interviewing and I was like, why do you make video games? And he was just like, well, I've loved them all my life. And I was like, yeah, but so have I.
I'm not downloading Game Maker and making Spelunky clones. That sounds scary.
It's funny because like the more I talk to like independent game developers, the more I'm like, why don't I just make a video game? They seem to, because they make it seem so easy. They just make it seem like success. They just pulled success out of their ass. I'm like, well, because like that happened to me with Anna Anthropy. Like the first interview I ever did was with Anna Anthropy, and she was like, well, you could just make a video game. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went away and downloaded Twine, and then I made their whole interview with Anna Anthropy in Twine. So it's a choose your own interview on Rock Paper Shotgun. That's the first thing that Rock Paper Shotgun ever published of mine. It was basically because I felt a lot like Anna Anthropy was telling me to make a game. So I just made a game. So yeah.
Stop being a coward and make a video game, Cara, all right? It's so easy. Everyone's doing it. Why not you?
It's peer pressure. It's peer pressure. It's what it is. It's like, it's like when I was at high school and everyone was like, why don't you just like start smoking? It will make you cool. And it, to be fair, it did.
Okay.
But if I make a video game, will I be cool, Patrick? I don't know.
Man, that's the existential question these days,
Yeah.
isn't it?
I'm gonna say no.
Making games and, you start like selling your television and.
Yeah. Alex says no, so I guess if Alex says no, then I guess it's the answer is no.
Okay, I'm
Video
sorry.
games don't make you cool. Smoking makes you cool.
Smoking makes you cool. Okay, what else? Yeah, okay.
What if you made a video game about smoking?
You could make a video game about smoking,
Yeah.
and then it would be cool.
Would it? I don't know. Alex, I defer.
Well, MGS, Snake smokes. It removes health, but it definitely, it gives other benefits. So
In Vanquish, there's an entire button dedicated to smoking.
I'm thinking more like a Yo Noid type of thing with a mascot character that just is a sentient cigarette.
Is he promoting cigarettes?
Oh
or...
God, yes.
Okay.
Wasn't there a time when people were banned from smoking in Hollywood movies or something because it was promoting cigarettes to kids, or I can't remember.
I don't think it's ever been banned, at least not in the U.S. But it is. I want to say that the MPAA started like noting that in like its ratings of films. Like I don't think you would ever get like a higher rating just because there was like abundant smoking, but it was something that they would note. But I don't think it was ever really banned. I think it just sort of fell out of favor. Maybe
it's a weird European thing where they started putting pressure or cutting out people smoking, or I don't know, I can't remember. But maybe they put out guidelines. But I heard this been for a while, but it's gone back to normal, and basically everyone smokes in movies now because it is cool. I maintain that it is cool to smoke.
It's the coolest, obviously.
Yeah, I mean,
have you seen Mad Men?
Yes, exactly. Smoking and drinking is cool, kids. It's cool.
Is it? I think when they smoke and drink on set, though, it's all fake, right? Like you can't actually drink alcohol on sets, right? Isn't that the case?
Well,
I want to say I read that somewhere.
Where like someone wrote this whole thing about there were some scenes in which Don Draper, the guy who plays Don Draper, was actually drunk in Mad Men. But I don't know. I don't know.
I want to say I read some sort of Actors Guild thing that you it's all like fake brown liquor and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess if nobody says anything, then once it's shot, what what are you gonna do?
Have you ever seen With Nail and I?
Yes.
It is a classic movie. You have to see it, Patrick. I am not going to stop bothering you until you watch the movie. But basically, it's like a classic British movie in which it's basically about these two out-of-work actors who have a fucking terrible time. That's all it is, right? It's about two guys having a really bad time. And they try and go on holiday to this, like, remote cottage somewhere in the middle of, like, England. And it's about everything that goes wrong on the way. And they go into this one pub that's like this remote English pub where everyone's hostile to them because they're posh, and they go in and they're like drunk, so they go in and they're just like, I demand the finest wines known to humanity or whatever to this like little dude in the pub, and he just sort of looks at them. But basically they go in this kind of drinking binge where they do like all these shots and like they're like filmed like drinking all this stuff, like basically everything that's available, and it's famously that they actually put like vinegar, they like got like vinegar shots, and like, put them, and the actors actually dying these vinegar shots, and like so the reactions are actually like of him actually drinking vinegar shots, and they didn't tell him that it was going to happen. And yeah, it's pretty classic. So yeah, that movie's incredible. It's got like a really good soundtrack as well. There's a bit with Jimi Hendrix, and they're like basically like piling it down the motorway onto Jimi Hendrix soundtrack. But yeah, it's really good.
One of the all-time great Richard Grant performances.
Yeah, he's an eccentric and exceptional actor. He's very good.
So Alex, you've been playing some video games. You've been playing. There's a quick look of Civ on the site that unfortunately was sort of swamped by the 96 hours of stupid stuff that was happening on the site all weekend. But I know you've been playing that new Civ, which unlocked, I think, for most people on Thursday or Friday. But
yep.
what do you think of that game?
I wouldn't say it was that unfortunate because I would say that quick look probably covers some of the same ground that we covered in the unfinished video we did last month. I've generally been enjoying the new Civ, despite the fact that it is very much the old Civ with a very distinct new coat of paint on it. It is the skeletal structure of Civilization V transformed into this kind of sci-fi thing. But you know, the nuts and bolts of the game are intensely familiar if you've spent any amount of time or a lot of time with Civ 5. I think at last count I was in the several hundreds of hours with that game. So not having that game, like the key things with that game are the end game progression is different. The aesthetics are obviously different. There is a new technology system, a tech web, which sort of prevents you from just unlocking every technology the way you could in the old game. You have to kind of focus on specific stuff in order to win. But you know, like playing it, like mechanics, UI, all that stuff, like it feels very much like they took Civilization V and said, we need to do something different with this, but we don't have enough time or budget to make a wholly new game. So here is this, and which is not to say that it is a bad game because of it, but it is definitely a very familiar feeling game.
Do you find that you end up sort of lapsing into the same basic strategies that you applied in Civ 5 as a result? And does that make it kind of like, could you imagine the attractiveness of playing this would wear off maybe a little bit quicker because fundamentally you're sort of kind of going through the same motions?
I mean, some of the strategies do apply, but the end game progression is markedly different. Like, you don't win just by, you know, unlocking the correct technologies to win, or, you know, getting the full cultural dominance victory or anything like that. The only one that is like the old victories is just the straight up military domination one. If otherwise, you have these affinities, which are, you know, that sort of determine how your society both looks and plays. You know, the harmony one is about sort of embedding yourself in the native biology of the planet. The supremacy one is much more about like transhumanism and cybernetics and that kind of stuff. And so you have to build these different victory-specific projects in order to get to the end. And how you go about those is a little bit different. Like the supremacy one, you have to build this emancipation gate and then just start sending military units through it. Which eventually means that you have taken over Earth with your technology. The biology one is all about like communicating with the sort of alien consciousness of the planet, and does not require any military units. So you're sort of building toward these different goals based on those affinities, and your strategies are kind of dictated by that. But they're also not so radically different that you're not just kind of doing the same kind of race to the end to be the first one to build your thing and do what you need to do to win. Like, it's the same type of race in each game. It just the aesthetics change.
Cara, have you played much of the Civ games?
I haven't played too much of them. Like, I used to get like super annoyed with the turn-basedness of it, simply because I came from like an Age of Empires kind of background where I was like really impatient for stuff to happen, and I'm like, why is this turn-based? I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I'm like, I don't have time to wait for all of you guys. So yeah, so I was a very impatient kid, and so it put me off Civ. But now I understand like a lot more about like why it's so important, because it's really a lot more complex than you initially think, and it's such an intelligently designed game. Because I remember like when I first started playing it, the cultural dominance victories were like really interesting to me, because I feel a lot like there is a system like in actual real life in which like when culture does bleed over into other, like one person's like culture, like one culture like bleeds over into other cultures, then actually what does happen is that when they kind of assimilate, then you've got this kind of understanding between those two cultures, and they're less likely to be hostile to each other. And I think that really actually is a thing that happens like for example, they for ages everyone was like spouting that quote, which was like, "No two countries with McDonald's have ever attacked each other." I don't know if that's actually still true, but whenever anyone would say that, I just thought of Civilization. I thought of Civ every single time. I was like, cultural dominance victory, you know? Like, it's really kind of incredible how game systems can actually emulate like these systems of real life in like such an incisive manner. Like, I really love it. Like, for example, here in Japan, like, baseball is massive. Like, it's huge. Like, after when America sort of basically culturally dominated Japan after the war, like, pretty much all these aspects of American culture started popping up. So, like, there's this huge baseball culture, and, like, there's definitely sort of, like, an emphasis on sports in Japan that didn't used to be there before. And there's like schools always like teach sports, like, and like sports are I don't think they were actually that important before America had much influence here. So it's super interesting to me because it happens I see it happening everywhere. I'm like, oh my god, Civ is real.
Well, you'll be saddened to learn that any of that sort of cultural stuff has pretty much been removed from Beyond Earth.
Oh really?
Yeah, there's not the closest you get is that affinity stuff where, you know, if you say, for instance, go down the harmony path, people that are doing the purity path, which is all about just maintaining humanity at all costs, will start chiding you for your shitty ideology and it not being lining up with what they like. But other than that sort of being kind of a grading thing between the two civs, like, there really is no cultural victory. Like, all the culture stuff is just about unlocking more bonuses, and that's kind of it.
Yeah. I mean, it always seemed like a kind of really simplistic thing, though, the idea that you might, like, a cultural victory, because obviously culture can be split up into lots of different things, like, you know, technology or, you know, that sort of thing. So I guess they've probably just refined it a little bit.
Yeah, it's just they've simplified it. I mean, this with Civilization 5, it took 2 expansions and like 3 years worth of patches to get that game to a really awesome place. They're starting over on a lot of things here, and it's missing a lot of the stuff that sort of made Civ 5 into this really awesomely complex game instead of this kind of cool sort of complex game that is maybe a little too easy to sort of beat up and win every single time.
Sure.
And in this case, you know, because they're starting over, it loses something in translation. And I found you might actually appreciate this. The game is a little faster than some of the other Civ games. Like, I managed to beat most of them in somewhere between like, I don't know, like 8 hours probably at the most, which is not short for a single game, but is short for a Civ game generally.
I love Civ because when I was at university, I didn't actually play much Civ, like I said, but my boyfriend did, and when my boyfriend was playing Civ, you couldn't drag him away from it. It was just Civ all the time. So I was off playing Counter-Strike because he was playing Civ, and like, my favorite thing about the whole thing was, like, it actually created this like giant rift between him and a friend.
Wow.
Because they did this thing where they did like they allied and they agreed not to attack each other.
Sure.
And then what happened was, like, Jack just decided one day that he was just gonna like completely backstab our friend and just like attack him and then take over all his stuff. And it's still a thing. So they fell out for like 2 weeks and didn't talk to each other. And then what happened was that when they meet up now, it's all they talk about is like, oh, you hey, backstabber, what's up, backstabber? It's really funny because it's like, this happened years ago. This is like 2004 or something. It happened years ago, and they still, like, when they see each other, it was just like, oh yeah, you're the guy backstabbing and Civ.
Civilization, ruining lives, both the game and actual Civilization, ruining lives.
Ruins lives. Civilization ruins lives. And so, you know, I'm not going to touch that stuff. It's dangerous. That's volatile. It's volatile shit there. So, yeah.
It's interesting how the game, you know, that's always been part of what's I found really interesting about it, even just stepping away from it, and the fact that I've never really played a Civ game myself, although I want to try and jump into this one at least to kind of get my feet wet. But it is that idea that, you know, games like to say, oh yeah, there's all sorts of different ways that you can approach a scenario, but, you know, they all often end in killing the thing or the dude that's at the end of that scenario, and it's just kind of how you approach that specifically. But Civ is one of those games that actually gives you some really interesting ways to achieve victory that don't necessarily involve just running over there with a whole set of tanks, which is pretty much all my strategies in real-time strategy games.
Yeah.
World of Warcraft, Red Alert, they were all just, you make the mammoth tank equivalent and make 50 of them and roll into the other section. But like in Fallout New Vegas, I loved that. In that game, I invested, I believe, up to 100 points in speech, which I maxed out the speech option. And if you do that, there's only one time in the game that you actually, I think this is right, that you actually need 100 speech in order to convince someone to do something, and it's the final battle in the game. And you can avoid the entire final battle in Fallout New Vegas by having enough speech and telling the other guy to basically just back down and go away. And so the game builds to this incredible climax, and then you just say, hey, dude, how about not? And the game just, it doesn't happen, and you just avoid the entire final battle completely. It's anticlimactic in a way that's really amazing.
How about a hug? How about we just hug?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because I was just talking to Jake about this because Jake was Jake was an investigative reporter around about the time that Deus Ex came out and a few other like huge titles. Like he remembers Thief and that era of video games where PC gaming became complex and interesting and like mysterious and alluring, and so he was an investigative reporter around about that time, and then they decided all of a sudden to like start paying attention to video games, and so like he started to run like the video game side of stuff, and so that was when he started playing video games, and he was saying like he feels like that era of video games with System Shock 2 and like all these titles like Thief were really interested in investigating ways in which you could like maneuver through the world without actually using violence. Like the idea that you might actually find another way to negotiate things was actually like that whole era was like based around that. Like Deus Ex made everything complex. The way that you went around sort of negotiating your environment, there was like several different ways you could do that. You could use this, you could hack the CCTV, or you could you could use like non-violent methods to distract guards and all of this stuff, and it was like really interesting era for trying to investigate other manners of doing stuff, but in so doing that it made the world seem so much more complex, like they complicated stuff, and I guess like that's why it's sort of kind of slightly disappointing that when you get to stuff like BioShock, which is slightly newer, then like the choices that are presented, at least narratively, are really simple. So it's like either kill the little sister or save the little sister, and there's no other complexity to it. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of weird that we've kind of regressed into like more simplistic systems, whereas like there's this golden era of video games like System Shock 2 where things seem more complex somehow.
Well, it seems like the complexity these days goes into, the pieces of the world. Like the AI systems are certainly more complex than they've ever been. But in terms of the player's agency on that world, that seems to have been stripped down in favor of the worlds themselves becoming more complex, which can be interesting in its own right. But my fondest memories are of the games that you're talking about. Is of playing the first level of Deus Ex 6 or 7 different times because there really were that many ways to go about it, and that was always something that I found so interesting and entertaining, and it makes it so memorable because it makes the experience feel like it's yours, even if the end goal is ultimately the same for all players.
Yeah, and like I love that kind of thing because it's like you can get in the pub or wherever it is you Americans go and to discuss stuff. And again,
we go to McDonald's, okay? We go to McDonald's.
Okay, go to McDonald's. No two countries at McDonald's, if ever. So yeah, anyway, you kind of go to the pub, and then you each played the same game, but you each have like these different stories to tell each other, and that for me is why I play games, because I want to tell stories and I want to talk about stuff with other people, and that's how I like negotiate the world, is in kind of communicating to other people like the experiences that I've had and like telling these kind of cool stories about what I've learned and what I've seen. And video games are these other worlds in which you want to be able to like make your own story, and like these games are like ultimately stuff like Deus Ex is like what I want to play, because you can definitely do that. And I guess the first moment of Deus Ex is like that I really remember is like the narrative that they put in place. Like I think Harvey Smith was responsible for this, but he basically made it so that you start the game and then someone's like, oh, your orders are basically assassinate this target, right? And then what happens is you meet your brother, I think, Paul or something. You meet your brother anyway, you meet up with him, and then he starts like complicating the whole thing by telling you like maybe sometimes it's not good to like use violence to solve a situation. And you know, there's all this message about in the game about how some people's terrorists are other people's freedom fighters, and you're like, you start to be like, what? You know? And that's the first time in which I felt like a video game really tried to not hold my hand. Like it started to just present a choice and be like, hey, like, why don't you decide what's the best course of doing stuff here? And it's really interesting to me that essentially no one's really tried, like people narratively now try and say like, oh, this is the way you do stuff, and there's a lot of hand-holding going on because they're afraid that we're not going to get it. They're afraid that we're not smart enough. You know, they're afraid that we're gonna play it, like reviewers are gonna play it and be like, and not get it, and then give it like a 2 or something. You know, I guess like that's what it's become, is because people are afraid of players being, I guess, I don't know, players just not getting what they've put there narratively, and that's a shame. Like that era was cool.
Well, I also wonder, and I don't have any evidence to directly back this up, but I wonder if this is anything that is sort of born out of the rampant focus testing of games, where you know they'll put people in a room and say like, here are these complex systems, try and figure them out, and they start getting a lot of feedback that's like, I don't understand this. It is something that I have noticed a lot, where especially lately in games where choice is an option. The choices have become increasingly binary. You know, not that this is a particularly great example, but the latest NBA game has a story mode where you create your own character and you are supposed to take him through the path of an actual career. And they frequently present you with these dialogue choices that are, you know, about shaping this character's personality and how he interacts with the rest of the league. Unfortunately, there are only 2 choices. One is be the really nice team player guy who never makes waves, or be the most colossal asshole imaginable. Like that's it, and it never shifts away from that. It never gives you more than 2 choices, and it is always the same choices presented with the same, like literally the nice choices on this side, the bad choices on this side. And it's so frustrating because you can see the idea, the potential for actually shaping something really cool with that system, but it never goes there, and it never really allows you any freedom at all with what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, you can see like a little bit of the sort of fleshing out of like how narrative works in Walking Dead, where it's like, you know, it's essentially like a kind of just an adventure game, really. But where the choices are presented, it's like neither of the choices. There's usually like 2 choices you can make, you know, at like a critical moment, and the 2 choices are always terrible. You know, like they're always just don't want to. You're like, why, God, why? No?
Yeah, it's basically two different people are going to die. You just choose which one dies, as opposed to, you know, a lot of the ways that these choices are set up is save the person or kill the person, which is just a choice between good and evil. Whereas in Walking Dead, it's like, hey, you're fucked either way. So it's just which way do you want to go?
It's like circumstantial for me. Like, one of the most human I've ever felt whilst playing a video game was when I was playing The Walking Dead, and I was supposed to choose between like save this person or save this person, and my hand slipped and chose the person that I didn't originally intend on choosing, right?
Oh no.
And I, you know, obviously neither is the better choice, right? But I felt so human in that moment, because that would happen to me in real life, where I'd fall over, or I'd like go to save someone and then actually end up saving the other person. I don't know, I just felt like it made me aware of the fact that like I'm a human being, and I would probably make a mistake in this situation, and it felt like really strange. I felt like at that moment where I was like, wow, video games, you know, you illuminated my humanity, you know, well done. Thanks.
I found the moments in The Walking Dead that, you know, certainly the moments where you're choosing between like who lives or dies are harrowing, and your story about slipping on the controller is hilarious. But I remember the one that sticks out the most from that first season is there's a sequence in which you're given, like, everyone's kind of camped out and there's not really like a whole lot of plot happening. Everyone's just kind of like waiting in this gas station, I think, is where everyone's kind of holed up, and you're given the ability to go hand out a bunch of snacks, like apples and a bunch of other things. And
that was at the hotel.
Yeah, the hotel. And as far as if I remember correctly, it doesn't have any real consequence on the story. It's just a matter of you. There are only so much food rations that your group has, and you get to choose how they get rationed out. And it doesn't have a life or death consequence, but it felt incredibly stressful to figure out who's going to get the apple, like who's going to get the peanut butter, and like all the whatever food that you had access to, and that stuff. Like my wife and I, like wringing our hands, like figuring out who we're going to give this last goddamn apple to, because we don't know if it's going to have an impact. It ultimately has no impact, but it was like just a small choice like that was so profound, and you don't see games framing choices that are that low level, but ultimately I think have more meaning.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like Steve Gaynor wrote this really interesting post that I always go back to because it's super interesting, where he basically argues that you can flesh out a character not by dialogue but like by just actions. Like you can literally tell a story through the actions that you make available to the player. So, for example, I think he said something like you could illustrate whether your character is a certain kind of person by making the option. If you go into church, say, you can make the option available to pray, and it has no narrative impact whatsoever on the rest of the game. Like it doesn't actually do anything really in the game, but you, the player, know that you knelt down to pray at that moment, and that probably has a really significant impact on you as a player in terms of role-playing or in terms of meaning. That's a meaningful choice that you made at that point in the video game. And like I thought that was really smart, because that is because I wrote a thing on Gone Home recently where I was like, like the put back mechanic that they had in place, like they said, initially we just had people like they could pick up something or whatever and they could just drop it. And that mechanic was in place, and people said, and he said, well, when he saw people playing the video game, like what he was surprised about was that the people would spend hours trying to put the goddamn thing back where it came from. Just like, because they hated the fact that they were in their own house and they dropped shit on the floor and it was messy, and like they were like, I'm in my own house, like I want to put this back, right? So they implemented this like put back mechanic where if you picked something up, you could then immediately put it back. You just press the same button and it would go back in the same place, and that was really interesting because it basically illustrates who you are as a character, because you belong in that house. You put stuff back, right? Like that's who you are because this is your house, and so that's really, really interesting to me, the idea that you can role play through like the options that the designers like leave you, and that's super interesting. Like I'd like to see way more of that, like just making like random options available, like in a Tale of Two Brothers. Did you play that?
Mm-hmm.
A Tale of Two Brothers, where like one brother would go, the option was to go up to interact with an old man on a bench, right? One brother would go up there and like just be like super nice to the guy, and the other little shit of a goddamn brother would just like basically dunk a bucket of water on this guy's head or something. And you're like, oh, but that is illustrative of who those two characters are. One's a nice mature dude, the other's like this little kid who's an asshole, like.
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night when I'm in the last bits of The Evil Within. I'm actually probably going to try and finish it this afternoon and write a review sometime tomorrow, in which what The Evil Within does is no different than what a lot of other games do. It's just I just found myself more and more often reaching the breaking point on this method of storytelling. But like, for example, exactly what you just described, of how you learn something about the relationship between these two brothers. You learn about the personalities of these two brothers in a way that happens completely seamlessly, in many ways optionally, but informs. You can imagine what they've done in their past without the game explicitly kind of laying that out. And The Evil Within does at no point ever tries to give any sort of like real motivation or insight into the characters beyond just little text things that you pick up throughout the game, in which the character, for whatever reason, is writing these diary entries and scattering them all throughout this scary mansion and other places that you're wandering through. And like it's so forced. Like they clearly came up with a backstory for the character. Like they've thought about this. They know who this character is, what his motivations are, how he's gotten to the place that he's at, but then never thought through how do we get that in the game in a way that doesn't feel incredibly forced. And it's games that are able to do that that I find myself really getting invested in the characters because I start kind of creating my own stories for them based on what the evidence the game is giving me, as opposed to just force-feeding me a diary entry that says, well, I've been drinking a lot lately and my life's not going well. You know, like, it's just, I don't find that interesting at all.
It's the difference between being able to explore who your character is and being told who your character is.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, definitely. Man, I was so jealous because, like, I was in Tokyo when my boss came to, at The Guardian, Keith Stewart, like, came to interview Shinji Mikami, and, like, oh my god, I'm so into Mikami's work, and I was like, can you try and get me in the room? And he was like, I'll try really hard. And then obviously the PRs were like, no, fuck you, leave. Like, it was really funny because, like, I had this one burning question I really wanted to ask Shinji Mikami, and I don't know if you guys have any insight on this whatsoever. I just really, really wanted to ask Shinji Mikami how he manages to put such good butts in his video. Like, oh my god, the butts of Shinji Mikami's video games. They are just perfect. They are perfect. Like, Leon S. Kennedy, perfect butt, right? Like, you've got, like, the ton of, like, Devil May Cry, perfect butt. Like, my god, the butts of Shinji Mikami should be a thing. Like, I feel like...
That could be like a coffee table book.
Huh?
That could be a coffee table book.
I feel a lot like... I think it's even in, God, what's that amazing shooter that he made?
Piano 3?
Yeah, that too. He made, like,
Vanquish.
Vanquish, yeah.
Vanquish is incredible. If you have not played Vanquish, it's a game that, like, precious few people have played. It's also, again, like I mentioned earlier, the game that has an entire button dedicated to smoking. This game has a button dedicated to smoking. So, Cara, like, if there was, like, the fact that you didn't play this and this wasn't your game of the year, I feel this is criminal.
I feel like I should totally get into it because butts and smoking, like, it's my perfect video game. So, yeah.
Well, then you love my new game, which is about a smoking butt.
A smoking butt, right? Okay, that's my perfect video game. Everyone out there, indie developers, send me your smoking butt games. 10 out of 10 immediately.
I should pass on. The chat has been asking me about this, and I wasn't aware of this meme, but apparently it happened during the most recent Extra Life live stream. So GameButts.club is a website that was started during the last Extra Life stream. It's a website dedicated to only the finest virtual posteriors, and It's just a Tumblr blog full of game butts and other butts. Just butts.
I can confirm this. I'm looking at it right now. There are several butts on this blog.
Yeah, Master Chief is just shaking it.
Oh, there's the Wario butt. Yeah, there we go.
I bet you Bayonetta is, like, a top butt.
There's like, a lot of dude butts right now. There's a significant amount of dude butt happening.
Oh, there's Voldo butt.
Voldo butt would be good. Yeah, for certain. I feel a lot like dude butts are an unappreciated thing in video games. Definitely Shinji Mikami is good at making dude butts. I think there's probably a reason why Keith didn't want me in the room.
So I have one final question. It's this might be a sensitive topic, but how do you get your game butts so round?
This is like probably why no one has made me an editor of a video game site right now, because all I do is like piss away advertisers' money on asking like heavyweight developers and why there's cool butts in their games. Like,
now, what do you think of the modern Resident Evil franchise, or how do you feel about game butts?
I mean, to be honest, I can tell you which one of those I would rather hear the answer to, and it's not the Resident Evil question. So there you go.
Right? Like, what's your favorite video game toilet? You know, like, that sort of question is important to me as a reader. I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to know the answer to that question. I would ask the butts and toilets questions, you know? The questions you want to know, you want to get answered, right? So
this is why you have a Patreon. So if people want to see more of this coverage, it is clearly getting ignored in the mainstream media.
Yes, the mainstream media is really very evil, and it's not answering the questions I want to know about.
The lamestream media is not telling us the truth about video game butts.
It's true, right? And I just want to say I am thinking about what I'm going to do next year instead of this traveling around thing, because I'm getting very tired of it. next year, what I might actually do is just like use my Patreon to set up like a subscription for me to just write one goddamn website, and it's just going to be like all Cara all the time, video game butts.
Yeah, I'm in. Collusion. Here's my $100.
Yeah, exactly. Because me and Tim Rogers were talking about this. He's looking for what to do with actionbutton.net, and he's like, I don't want to write to it anymore. I don't have time. And I was like, well, why don't I just become editor-in-chief of actionbutton.net, and then we could just write reviews of stuff that we want to write reviews of, and that would be it. And then we could try and Kickstarter or something. But then it would just be like me and Tim just like writing like 10,000 words on a really obscure video game and talking about butts, I guess. So that is an option maybe for next year.
There are worse things to spend your money on than 10,000 words on butts. Like I mean, come on.
Half the shit I spend my money on is way more worthless than the idea of like well-constructed criticisms of butts.
I think Dante from the MC's butt could probably keep me going for 20,000 words. Let's see, we'll see how that goes.
Alex, this NBA game has got, a lot of video games have face capture technology to get your face in the game. No games have butt capture technology.
Well, to be fair, your face is something that maybe you want to try and personalize in a game like that. How many people are so proud of their butt that they really want to have that rendered in exquisite detail in a video game? Isn't it better to fantasize about having a better butt than the one you have?
Well, I mean, personally, I'm pretty annoyed that there's no Beyonce video game, right? Like, so I feel like Shinji Mikami should make a Beyonce video game.
They tried to make one. There was going to be a dance game with Beyonce,
Yeah.
And then there was a horrible lawsuit over it.
That is a video game butt that you want to exist, right? Like, you want a Beyonce butt in a video game. Like, I feel like, objectification or whatever, but Beyonce owns that shit, right? Like, she owns that shit, right? She this is her show, this is her stuff, she's the one. So, you can make a video game about Beyonce doing her own shit, but also at the same time having an incredible butt.
I mean, if Beyonce wants her butt in a video game, who the hell are any of us to tell Beyonce she can't have that?
Exactly.
That's a season pass that you could sell.
Actually, I'm trying to think about Shinji Mikami making a Beyonce video game, and now it's melting my brain a little bit. What would that game be? It would be creepy as hell. Like, it would be Beyonce. Maybe it would be like, Jay-Z's not home, Beyonce comes back by herself. What's gonna happen? Like.
A game where Beyonce has to rescue Jay-Z from the clutches of some evil villain, and also maybe the other members of Destiny's Child would be pretty amazing.
And I also feel like there could be loads of jokes told there, like environmental jokes, like, like that bit in like Drunken Love where like Jay-Z's like, fucked up my Warhol, and like you could go in and the Warhol is slightly squint on the wall, or like. I mean,
oh my God.
This is just right for like, it's fantastic. Definitely, I feel like Beyonce would be into it. If she's into it, I'm into it, basically.
That's the crossover.
Anyway,
I feel like we've done a lot of important work for games here, people.
We have moved video games on now. We have gone into sophisticated territory.
Yeah, man, we fixed video games in the last hour. I'm pretty impressed with us.
We have fixed video games, and now only Zen.
Exactly. So, Cara, what are you up to in Japan for the rest of your time? How much longer are you there, and when can people look forward to actually seeing some of the work you've been getting up to?
So it'll be out on the last day of October, which I think is Halloween. So I'm writing about Ojiro right now, and that's going to go up. And all my escapades, you can read about them there. And then what I'm doing is I'm actually going to. I used to live in a place called Kagoshima in the south of Kyushu in Japan, and so I'm actually going back there for a week just because I haven't been back there since 2010, and I missed it a little bit. So I'm going to go back and visit everyone there. And so I'm going to do that for a few days, and then I'm going to Singapore. Singapore is the next stop, and I'm going to speak to all of the cool indie devs in Singapore. And then I actually am doing a talk at NYU for the rest. I mean, I'm going back to New York towards the end of November and doing a talk at NYU, I think on the 20th. So if you're in New York, I know Alex is, you have no excuse. I'm going to do a lecture there at the Game Center about my findings of like traveling around and asking developers really annoying questions and taking pictures of their bathrooms. So I don't know what kind of I haven't written it yet, but I certainly have some useful insights into the way that designers are thinking about their work these days. So that's what I'm going to do a talk about. And I haven't really decided what's going to happen in December. I think I might go to Australia and then finish up the whole trip in Australia because there's a really interesting indie scene there as well.
Alex, aren't you doing some talk? I thought I saw that on.
I already did that. So I briefly spoke at Chris Plant's Intro to Games Journalism class at Game Center last week alongside Russ Frushtick and Tina Meany and Jordan Hoffman, who's a film writer. And we just sort of gave a brief overview of our careers and the weird serpentine paths that we have woven through this bizarre industry. But that already happened, so.
Okay.
How did you prevent yourself from being unrelentingly cynical?
I didn't.
Okay. Because I just get up there and be like, I recommend using a pseudonym. You know, like, that's what I would do. Young writers, definitely pretend to be someone else because you are going to get attacked for just being a person.
Yeah, I basically, not so much, use a pseudonym so much as if you are very passionate about video games and you want to actually make a living making video games, don't become a writer, was pretty much the grand crux of my talk, which isn't to say that I don't want people to become game writers, but don't go into it thinking like this is going to be your, extremely financially beneficial career, because that hasn't worked out for most people.
Yeah, I mean, it's working out for me in this project, simply having like a kind of base wage that Patreon provides for me, definitely. But this money isn't forever, and it's for a specific thing. So it's definitely something that I have to sort of think about now is like essentially where do I go? Like what do I do now? Because I don't think like when I was a full-time freelancer, I didn't think the traditional sort of game journalism sort of pay structure was like really keeping me afloat. So it's really interesting, actually, like the economics of it all, because I'm not sure it's actually survivable anymore. And Patreon, I guess, is a kind of way out of that structure. But yeah, it's interesting, definitely.
Well, I'm glad it's there, and I'm glad it's allowed you to do the kinds of crazy work that you like to do, because it is a joy to read that stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I'm enjoying providing it, definitely, for sure. And I love like all of my lovely Patreon supporters. Like they've been incredible. They're always constructive with their feedback. Like they're definitely so supportive of what I do, and like they put up like $1, whatever it is, every month, like more just to see some goddamn crazy thing I've written like in 5,000 words from someone's couch. So that's incredible. It's been a weird and wonderful journey, and I hope it produces. I'm producing a book from it at the end, so you can buy that at the end of it.
If you just made a game, then you would solve all your problems. So I'm not sure why you're acting like this is all so difficult to do.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Why don't I just make a game? God damn it!
You could just be Notch right now. Isn't that what happens to every indie developer? Eventually, they just become Notch.
Exactly. I could just become Notch like tomorrow.
Just download Game Maker and become Notch.
Ojiro-san would just be like, why don't you just make a game? Why don't you just make a game? Shut up, Ojiro. Like, just because you're a boy genius. Like, 52, what a fucker.
Well, before we close, one of the I do want to at least touch on one of the pieces of news that came out. Microsoft's announced this morning that they are going to temporarily slash the price of the Xbox One, which is already slashed from $500 to $400. Because they dropped the Kinect as a mandatory bundle. But now, starting November 2nd, and I believe through January 3rd, the Xbox One is going to be $349, and there are several bundles coming out alongside that. You can get a Sunset Overdrive bundle that comes with a copy of that game and Xbox One for $349, and I believe there's also a Assassin's Creed Unity bundle in which you get that game plus an Xbox One for $349, which basically, if you are interested in either of those games, really makes the Xbox One an incredibly cheap proposition, at least for the next couple of months. But Alex, I'm curious what you think about that move and what maybe that means for the next like month or so.
I mean, I don't. That's a hard thing to prognosticate about, but I imagine that if they are looking at their numbers and they feel like they are falling too far behind what the PlayStation has been doing, then this probably seems like a totally reasonable move. You know, I mean, I'm sure some people will say it smacks of desperation, and you know, maybe it does a little bit, but if you want your system in people's hands, if you want people to actually start buying games on that system, you need to get it in there, and you need to find a price that people will pay attention to. And less than the PlayStation 4 right now is probably the best price they could be offering, because right now that thing has a pretty commanding lead, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they've been the best-selling console for, you know, basically, you know, the entire time those two machines have been out. So this does come across as a bit of a Hail Mary. I wouldn't be surprised if this actually turned into a permanent price cut, but that promoting it as a holiday price cut that is temporary is definitely a great way to incentivize people to purchase during the important holiday season, in which you have to imagine a lot of parents and other folks are making sort of decisions on which console they're going to buy. And, you know, a lot of people only buy one. So by making it seem like, oh, God, if you do it right now, it's the only time you'll get it for this cheap, and then maybe it just stays permanent once the holiday season is over, I wouldn't be completely shocked about that. But it seems like an interesting move. It's cheap. Sunset Overdrive seems like it's awesome. I haven't played it yet, but after The Evil Within and Alien Isolation, I need to play something that is not going to make me feel awful all the time. I need to leave this world of oppressive, dark, violent, horrifying things, and
instead, like, start shooting oppressively horrible, violent things in a much more colorful environment, I guess.
That's fine. With like a blue sky. That's an improvement.
Blue and orange, just blue and orange all over that game.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's interesting. But you know, whether that makes a sort of long-term impact, hard to say. But certainly Microsoft is making a pretty big go at it in a way that you can't say they aren't trying. Whether it works out, hard to know right now. But they are certainly going for it. And you know, Sunset Overdrive seems like a good entry point into the Xbox One if it's something you're looking for. But what else do you have going on?
Cara, how many Xbox Ones have you seen in Japan?
Oh God.
Oh God, like none.
Yeah.
Yeah, people here are not into that console, sadly. But did you read Yannick Lejack's review of Sunset Overdrive? Because it's so funny to me, because he talks about how slowly the really overt sense of humor, which is based upon dick jokes, initially was funny, but then it's just grinding, so by the end of the game it's like offensive and annoying, and eventually like he was just like, it was so funny reading it because you can like hear the exasperation. So I laughed like all the way through his review, because he was like, yeah, it's a great game, but also, oh my God, the dick jokes.
Yeah, the impression I've gotten from reading multiple reviews of that game is that there is a distinct personality to that game, and it becomes incredibly grating by the time you kind of get into the late progression of it. Just a lot of weird tonal shifts that don't make a lot of sense, and just a lot of disparate weirdness that is not necessarily funny the whole way through.
For sure.
So we'll see. Yeah. I know Brad's playing it right now. I haven't heard what he thinks of it, but I imagine our review of that will probably hit pretty soon.
I mean, I played a little bit of it at E3, and it was fun, I guess. I mean, I had a good time, but there were definitely not enough of it there for me to make a judgment on whether it was good or bad. But
I think, Cara, wasn't I talking to you when some Microsoft PR person came over and I was like, hey, you should let her go play Sunset Overdrive? Cara's
yes,
pretty great.
In fact, Patrick is actually responsible for my playing
I thought so.
At E3, which is cool, right? So I got an in, and it scoops.
Yeah, it's a little tiny scoop, but you know, a little bit of scoops. Yeah, I want to play that game just because no one has really made a game like Jet Set Radio since Jet Set Radio, and this seems like the closest to a modern take on that in a long time, which gets me excited because I loved me some Jet Set Radio when that came out. And I call it Jet Set Radio because that's its real name. Jet Grind Radio is not its real name. I don't care what it was called in America.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I played it was a bit clunky, I guess. Like, I felt like it didn't really flow for me. So I wonder, like, I mean, I think it was just like, I don't know, like, I felt a little bit like it was sort of jerky mechanic. I don't know, like it was weird. So I hope that they've kind of either ironed that out or that it's not so obvious in the rest of the game. But yeah, that was my view of it then. But I loved the aesthetic of it, like the pop artness of it. It was cool. I don't know whether the dick jokes would annoy me or whatever. I love dick jokes.
As long as the dick jokes are treated with a certain amount of care, I'm usually fine with it. But if you're just going to start throwing them out all willy-nilly, then that's not going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, I did write that one thing about the Xbox One, how I tried to log into the Xbox One with my butt once. So that's another butt-related thing. I wrote a thing for The Guardian about trying to log in with my butt. And, like, here's the information I find out about that. You cannot log in with your butt. It is not possible unless you put some eyes and a mouth on your butt.
Ah.
You can then log in with your butt. You can log in with your dog as well, I found out.
This is amazing.
It has, like, dog facial recognition.
I'm learning so much right now. How can I unlearn everything I'm learning right now?
And that's why, if you have enjoyed all of this knowledge, you should go to Cara's Patreon page, which is what? Patreon.com/Cara Ellison? Is that right?
It's patreon.com/Cara-chan, CARACHAN. But you can also find out from my website, which is just caraellison.co.uk. So there you go. All of my work.
Butts. You know where to
It's
go.
all butt-based humor.
Hey, everyone's got to find their niche. Some people write about MOBAs. Some people write about esports. You write about butts.
Butts.
Awesome. Well, if as we mentioned at the top, the Extra Life stream has been going on our site for the last 4 days, and it is finally over. Various archives are being worked on. We need to figure out exactly how that is displayed on the site and in what form. Alex said that maybe Brad lost some of his video, so I'm not sure. We'll have most of it. Most of what you saw or didn't see over the 96 hours will appear on the site in some form. I'm going to start working on the Iron Galaxy Giant Bomb one, so that can start going up on the site in the next couple of days. But give us a little bit of time. Some folks, including Drew and Alexis, just are heading to bed right now, so that stuff will appear on the site, or at least parts of it will appear on the site. But in addition to that, we're less than $10,000 away from Giant Bomb's staff goal of $100,000, and you can donate the entire rest of the year. It's just because the streams have stopped does not mean you can't keep kicking in a couple of dollars if you didn't get a chance to before or weren't able to for whatever reason. So you can find the link to that in the chat right now. It's on the page, and also just do a search for Giant Bomb Extra Life, and you'll find our team page where you can donate to the staff version or whatever community ones are still going on. But we smashed our overall Giant Bomb goal. Looks like we're on the road to 200,000, which is really, really incredible. You guys have done a really good thing by supporting us being total idiots for 4 days. So thank you for that. According to the chat, Brad fixed his problem, so I guess maybe he'll have
Excellent.
an archive. So look for that stuff in the days ahead. And again, you can support Cara and all the amazingly smart, insightful butt journalism that she's doing at patreon.com/Cara-chan. And then is your Twitter just Cara-chan as well? Is that Cara Ellison?
My Twitter is @Cara Ellison, all one word. Yeah. There you
All right.
go.
And then Alex, what are you getting up to this week?
So I will have reviews of both Civ Beyond Earth and my much belated NBA review this week. And other than that, Vinny and I are probably just going to do some more quick looks and just kind of get back into the regular swing of things. What about you?
So I'm going to start working on the archive for the Iron Galaxy stuff. I'm going to get Worth Reading together. Obviously, I wasn't able to work on that on Friday, but once I kind of get this show over with, I'll eat some lunch and I'll put together Worth Reading, and then I'm going to finish playing Evil Within. And then I will hopefully write a review of that tomorrow. I got answers back from John Carpenter in which I think we're progressing in a direction where the answers are getting shorter and shorter the more times
Excellent.
I ask him to get in touch with us. But he did answer a handful of questions, and we appreciate that he takes the time to answer our dumb questions. So the last thing I'm going to complain about is the Thing director, John Carpenter, not wanting to give us the time of day. But apparently someone was at a horror convention and went up to him and got a picture with him and made sure and let him know that he appreciates all the stuff he does on the site. So we're getting some real-world encouragement out there to keep John Carpenter to be, every once in a while contributor to the Giant Bomb universe.
I would be genuinely surprised if his reaction to that was not just him smiling, not him going, "Oh, thank you," and not having any idea what that person was talking about.
Based on the shortness of the responses, it would not surprise me if we're just part of 10 of them that he's sending out every day. But it's awesome. The fact that I get to say I'm emailing John Carpenter is one of the greatest joys of my life. So again, we thank him for that. And look for that on the site either tomorrow or Wednesday. But that's going to do it for Bombin the with Scoops of the Wolf. We will be back on Friday. Our thanks again to Cara, and again, our Extra Life stuff is ongoing. Look for the archive soon, and we will see you guys again on Friday.